Miyazaki is back, and I promised that I would actually do a review for this movie. And the reason that I was struggling thinking about how I wanted to talk about The Boy and the Heron was simply because I am no expert in Miyazaki. I always try to come in here with an understanding of the filmmaker and their intent, and that the world of which they're trying to create. Miyazaki is one of the most acclaimed directors of all time. Take out the international element of it. This is a beloved director with the Studio Ghibli company, making Studio Ghibli what it is. And it's a director that I have very little familiarity with. And the films that I have seen, such as Spirited Away, I actually just don't have much patience for them. And thus, I was really apprehensive going into The Boy and the Heron. And after watching it, if you haven't seen it, I did an out of theater reaction for this movie, but I didn't really know what to make of it. I saw it now 24 hours ago. I got to read some really great reviews of this film, and I feel more comfortable in expressing how I want to talk about The Boy and the Heron, which is a semi loose autobiographical story for Miyazaki. It's autobiographical in the sense that he is someone who grew up in World War II Japan. Now, slightly different because in The Boy and the Heron, this boy is approximately 10 to 12 years old when the events of this movie kickstart, where Miyazaki is born in 1941. But it's also the story about a father who works at a plane factory. There is a lot of elements in this movie that feel autobiographical, probably more in just how the creative tells to more in the element of how the creator of this film choose to tells his creative instincts in The Boy and the Heron, which this film follows this young boy who loses his mother to a basically a hospital is set on fire, and she's there at the hospital at the time he loses her mother. The father remarries the sister of the mother, which is something that's just kind of wild and never really addressed again in the movie in any more ways. And it's this now kid who's about 12, 13 years old, in his teenage years, I think is the best way to describe it. He's moving into this new area of Japan post the war, and he's having to accommodate to his new life and his new mother. And eventually, he meets this heron that starts teasing him and says that his mother's still alive and that the heron will take him to see his mother, which leads to, as I would like to best describe it, as a really wacky, almost Wizard of Oz meets Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole type of adventure where we follow these characters into a tower and we find this basically bird kingdom. Is it fantasy? Is it not? It's allegorical for sure. And that's what The Boy and the Heron is. And I didn't know that's what the movie was before. So for the first hour of this movie, when it is solely focusing on this kid trying to make his way into this new world, it felt familiar. It felt safe for me, I guess you could almost say, where I understood what was going on. I felt at peace with this movie. There's this tranquility nature to the storytelling that I just settled into, and I was really enjoying and getting into the vibe. The musical score of this movie is absolutely wonderful, and there's this dramatic beats of these movie that are actually hitting for me in a really compelling way. When we move into the tower, it's becomes a little bit mixed bag for me, mainly because it took me a little bit of time to get adjusted into what is going on and the weirdness that this film is going to get. Boy and the Heron is very experimental in its style of animation. There is some incredibly gorgeously animated scenes in there, and there's also just a lot that I wasn't really picking up on. Again, not being someone familiar with Miyazaki's story, his films, and the culture of Japan, there felt like a lot that was going over my head while watching this, and thus I noticed my attention kind of coming in and out of this movie based on how much emotional investment I had in each scene. Now, there are elements of this story that I found really compelling on a context level of knowing who Miyazaki is, which he's this aging director, age 82. He has this really complicated relationship with his son, who is also an artist, who's also working in Studio Ghibli. They had this weird kind of back and forth based on one of the son's previous movies. And this movie is both an autobiographical story about Miyazaki as a boy and also an autobiographical in nature story about Miyazaki as an old master, basically having to kind of learn what's going to happen next. It is both self reflective as it is nostalgic in certain elements. And that really worked in the film, thinking about it on an intellectual level, where you're seeing this character in the grand uncle that comes in later in the film, which feels like Miyazaki now. This character who is older in his life, he is going to depart the world soon, and thus he kind of needs to have this heir. And that's when the movie I found to just be really compelling was when I thought of Miyazaki and what he thought of himself, this creative force that is maybe unmatched. And also, does he have the tools and has he lent the tools for people to kind of take over his vision? Because that is essentially what The Boy and the Heron is about. It is this coming of age story for the titular boy in this film, having to make the decision to come into this new world and then seek basically what he is searching for, and also then decide what he wants to do. And does he want to stay put, and or does he want to make the world, or does he want to go back to the world that has caused him so much pain, the world without his mom? And that's what this film is really emotionally compelling in at these moments. I also found it quite interesting looking at this film when you think of how much this film is about Miyazaki, about his father, about Miyazaki himself, and about Miyazaki's son, and how all three of those characters in Miyazaki are represented as literal characters in this film. And it also has a lot to do about his mother, who's been a heavy inspiration for Miyazaki throughout his entire career. What it says about his relationship with his mother, the fountain of creativity that it brings, and what that means. This is a movie that is wrestling with the creative process of wrestling with how much our inner consciousness affects the creativity that we bring, how much experience, how much pain is a reflection of ourselves in our art. And that's when this movie is really working for me. The pacing of The Boy and the Heron is what I struggled with. And it's just simply there were scenes that I just lost emotional investment with. And I know some people have called this film extremely emotionally powerful in the end. It wasn't the gut punch that I wanted it to be. It was more of a contemplative gut punch, I guess you could say, where I found myself interested in what this film was trying to say, but it never really got there. I've noticed myself dozing off at certain scenes, and I just noticed myself feeling a little bit confused and alienated by it, especially because a lot of the stuff that I've talked about in this review, I've learned post watching this film. Knowing everything that I know now about this film, The Boy and the Heron might very well be deserving of a rewatch. At this moment, I struggled with it in certain parts, and I also found it majestic in other parts. I can recommend this film, and I can also say that this is a challenging film, and not everyone is going to appreciate it. And I struggled at times to appreciate it. However, it is worth wrestling with and thinking about. And I believe there's been some really great critical analysis on this film, especially from this Japanese website. I believe it's called the Japanese Times, which wrote this incredible critical analysis of this film. Roger Ebert's website has one right now that I found very interesting. And the New York Times had this really incredible article on The Boy and the Heron. So there's definitely been a lot of great readings. That would be what I encourage people to do post seeing this movie, is learn about this movie. And thus, my review is I am giving The Boy and the Heron 3 out of 5 stars. So thank you all for watching this video. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more videos coming at you soon. I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe so I can hit 500 before the end of this year. My name is Ben Friedman. Take care and bye-bye.